because that's a bit like how yurts are. They look quite comical, they've got a bit of a silly name, but as I'm going to try and convince you, they're actually pretty practical structures and interesting with it. So I'll talk a little bit about what they are for those of you who don't know and where they come from, and then a bit about how they're designed and techniques for building them. Okay, so some of you quite possibly are thinking, what the hell is a yurt? So for those of you that don't know, I'll put you out of your misery, show you a picture of your typical yurt, decorated in the traditional fashion. So as you can see, it's a large canvas covered tent basically. And what we see there isn't actually technically a yurt. That's what those of us who know what yurts are, think of as a yurt is actually the Mongolian ger, spelled G-E-R. There are a number of different forms of yurt, and this is the one we're most familiar with. So if we take the canvas off and look inside of the structure, we can see it's fairly simple. We've got vertical walls made from a kind of lattice structure, and then a roof of poles which are attached to the top of the walls, held together by a central crown ring in the middle. And the whole thing is held in place by this black tension band that you see here. So that's basically how the structure works, but I'll go into more detail on that in a bit. So a bit of background. Traditionally, yurts are thought of as Mongolian. In fact, they're found all over Central Asia, and they were traditionally used by nomadic people. So they're portable structures. So you find them from right the way over in northern Mongolia and Siberia in the Far East, across Central Asia, so the likes of Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, even everyone's favourite Kazakhstan, right the way over into eastern Turkey at the far western side. In fact, this flag here is the flag of Kyrgyzstan, which gained independence in 1991. That flag was adopted in 1992, and you can see the symbol in the middle there is actually of a yurt crown, which shows how central these structures are to the way of life in many parts of Asia. So they were the yurt that we know today was developed from a sort of teepee-like structure used by reindeer herders in the far northeast of Asia, and you can see how gradually walls have been added to form what we know today. We don't know a lot about the exact origins of them because they're used by nomadic peoples who don't tend to have any written record of their history. The first time we do start to hear about Mongolia in history is during the reign of Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire in the 12th and 13th century, by which time the yurt, as we see at the end there, had been developed. In fact, Genghis Khan ruled over the whole Mongol Empire from his own yurt, which was built on the back of a large cart, which was pulled around by oxen. But bring them up to the present day. These sort of structures, which have changed very little, are still around. So you can see, obviously, they're quite adaptable, but the basic design has stood the test of time. So I don't think Genghis Khan had satellite TV and a solar panel, but that's not to say you can't do it. And in fact, so many Mongolians now still live in yurts. In fact, even in the capital, Ulaanbaatar, 43% of the population still live in yurts. Which isn't to say that this is the most salubrious of accommodation. Mongolia, on the whole, is a very poor country. but that's more symptomatic of the same thing we get in a lot of developing countries, where we get mass migration from rural areas into urban areas, and less to do with the actual year. So I won't go into that. It's not to say that that this man has any less of a good life in his yurt than in the tower blocks behind him. But we in the West we've kind of taken this this basic structure and adopted it and adapted it for our own purpose. So there are many people who use a small yurt for, in the same way that we might use a normal tent just on an ordinary camping trip, and so they can be very basic inside, but they can also be made very luxurious. They're on a more permanent site. You know, they rival a 5-star hotel in some cases. So we've built big ones, and we've built huge ones. So tiny little ones here, so maybe 9 or 10 foot diameter, just for a small camping trip, to large ones for events. So that's maybe 40 foot in diameter. People have used them for weddings, use them for small offices, even restaurants. And this happy couple even live in their own yurt in Devon. So it's not just Mongolia, it's Devon as well. So why are they so great then? What do I think so good about them? Well, traditionally, as I said, they're a nomadic dwelling, and so your home needs to be portable. Traditionally, they'd be pulled by on a cart behind an oxen, but you can use whatever form of transport you happen to have. So of course the whole structure needs to be dismantleable, and so it needs to be quite lightweight and easy and quick to erect after a bit of practice, which a yurt is. But despite being easy and quick to erect and lightweight, it's also quite a stable structure, which is an inherent part of the design. We have the weight from the roof, which pushes down onto the top of the walls, which are held in tension, and so the whole thing is quite stable, which is useful if you get, say, a big lump of snow on top of your yurt. They're also surprisingly secure, given that they're a tent. If you have a solid wooden door with a lock on it, it's as secure as any lock on any permanent building. And although the sides are canvas and so it could be cut, you've then got a lattice of wood inside, which, okay, you could saw it, but you could put a brick through your window. I'm not going to. And they're also inherently quite weatherproof. The design offers quite a small resistance to the wind, which is important on the open steppes of Mongolia, where there's no shelter from the wind. So the circular shape with the conical roof, the wind flows over it very well. And the way they're built, it makes them very easy to waterproof. They're traditionally insulated, which obviously has benefits if it's cold, but even if it's not, they're very easy to heat with a small wood burner or similar. And the same insulation keeps you cool in the heat. Not usually a problem in Newcastle, but also if the sides can be lifted up to allow, and then you've got a natural ventilation system whereby the hot air rises out of the crown and draws cool air in through the bottom. A couple of other advantages. They're quite easy and cheap to build, or they can be. You can build very elaborate ones and spend a lot of money on them, or you can build them very cheaply. They can be very environmentally friendly. The main materials are all natural, so wood and cotton typically. and they're very long lasting. A typical Mongolian yurt builder would expect his yurt to last for up to 100 years, which is probably more than many of the buildings that we're building today would last. And most importantly, they're fun. I mean, who can deny that you wouldn't rather sleep in that than a normal tent, or even a hotel for that matter. But yeah, so if they're so good, why am I not building one? Well, I am. And so as I talk you through the yurt I'm currently building, I'll show you a bit about in a bit more detail about the main components and how they're designed, and I'll even try and throw in some tenuously technical bits to keep the engineer in you happy. So the first main component, I mean, the yurt breaks down quite well into components, which is one of the things that makes it easy to build. Obviously the lattice wall here made of wooden poles tied together at an angle. Typically they'd be anywhere from 3 to 6 feet in height. This is ours. It's 5 feet high, which you may think isn't high enough for a wall, but in fact, I mean, I'm 6 foot and I can step inside with a 5 foot wall, and because of the pitch of the roof, it doesn't feel cramped at all. So obviously the wall itself will be very long. It's typically split into sections, and it will usually be made from some sort of springy hardwood, so such as ash, or even from round wood in its its raw form off the tree. So anything that can be coppice and produces roundwood poles, such as willow or hazel. So this is our technique for making wall poles. So we start with the raw logs you can see down there. This is ash, which has been coppice, so that's where it's been taken out of an area of woodland to allow the woodland to regrow. And it's split down here, as you see, with a tool called a froe. So by splitting the wood down rather than sawing it, we're keeping the natural strength of the timber, which is in the grain. Obviously it splits along the grain, so as long as the grain is straight, you get a nice straight split and a very strong pole. So each one's then split down further into smaller sections, and then we take this, which is a traditional green woodworking tool called a sheaf horse, which is basically a foot operated clamp. So you'd sit on this end here, put your feet on the pedals there, and then you push that forward. It pivots the head down and allows you to clamp the pole in front of you without using your hands, at which point you can use one of these, which is a draw blade, an open blade, which you draw towards you, shave off the excess wood to shape it down. So that's those tools, but I just showed you that. So you'd end up with something like this. Now, of course, that's straight. So if we just tied those together and then bent it round into a wall, we'd end up with a quite unusual shape. And here's engineering fact number 1. We'd end up with a shape called a hyperboloid, specifically a one-sheeted hyperboloid. Now, as you can see, if we bend that, we'll end up with walls that curve in, whereas we want vertical walls. So the way we solve that is to bend the wood. Traditionally, we'd steam bend this, where it's enclosed in a chamber heated with water in it, heated to produce steam, which then is driven into the wood, and wood becomes very pliable. We put it on a former, and it dries and keeps the shape that we give it. Because we use fresh wood, green wood, we actually placed it onto the formers and allowed it to dry naturally, as timber does after you cut it. And so after about a month or so on these formers, these came out with a nice bend. So we put it together with some smaller sections, which form the ends of the walls, because they're poles are diagonal, so obviously to get a square end of a wall section we need short poles at the end. And then each pole was sanded and finished using linseed oil, which is a natural finish, to produce 4 sections of wall like this. As you can see, drilled and tied together. Traditionally that would be with wet rawhide, but not actually having any wet rawhide and not having any desire to find any, we just use cotton. So next major component is the door, which traditionally is a very important part of the yurt and would be decorated to match. So that's the traditional one there. Ours is actually made from recycled beam, which is some nice old heavy wood. So that's the threshold you can see there. And that's the finished product there. So the frame is an old beam. The door itself is made from an off-cut supply, and that window is perspex, which was from an old shop display that was being thrown out. So that's our door there. And as you can see, there's recesses in the side of the frame to allow the walls to slot in. That's the complete bottom layer of the frame. So you see it's a bit wonky there, but that's because we don't have any tension on it at the moment. So moving on to the roof, the main part of the roof is the crown wheel in there. So typically 18 inches to 5 feet, depending on the size of the yurt really. We built ours 4 feet to give us plenty of light. There are 2 main types of designs of crown. So there's a solid crown like you see there, which would usually be made from some sort of dense hardwood, just shaped and laminated, so oak or beech, something like that. And that's the traditional Mongolian style. This is more of a Western style, so it might be found in Kyrgyzstan or Turkey, where you've got a bent wood ring. So that's steam bent in the same way that I previously discussed, around the outside, and the holes would traditionally be burnt through it, which actually gives a much lighter crown, but because of the way the grain runs round, the crown's still very strong. I made ours from some old teak worktops. We went for a solid crown, mainly an aesthetic choice really. We also went for an open design. This is quite a wide crown, as I said, 4 feet. So we want to let plenty of light in. This is strong enough without any bracing, so again, more light. So it was made from old teak workshops, laminated in 3 layers. Holes drilled in the side to take the ends of the roof poles, and that's the finished article as you see there. So the rest of the roof is made up of poles, which the diameter is the length, obviously dependent on the size of the crown and the diameter of the yurt. Same sorts of materials as the walls really. So there's a lot of them, one for each crossover point on the walls, which obviously spreads the load out. So you see there how they attach to each head on the walls, and then the tension band is wrapped around to keep everything nice and tight. So that is So that's the finished frame. Then we have a canvas outer, which I'm going to say less about. It's fairly obvious what happens. There's a wall section, which is a very long section, difficult to manage in thick canvas. I brought a bit in actually. As you can see, it's pretty thick stuff. And so that length is it's 14 foot in diameter, so that's about 42 feet in length. that canvas, so quite tricky to manipulate. But luckily, I happen to know an expert canvas designer, also happens to be my mother. So I thought I'd throw some maths in here because if you like maths, this is vaguely interesting. The Yurt roof, we got a Yurt roof. I'll speed through this. Then we've got a circle of canvas, which obviously needs a cut out to then be brought round into a cone. Now the angle of the cut out, of course, is dependent on the pitch of the roof, and so if you do the maths, like I obviously didn't do before, you then actually find by coincidence that it's that the angle you need or the proportion of the angle that you need to cut out is the cosine of the pitch of the roof. So there's the roof canvas on. I haven't actually got a photo of both the roof canvas and the wall canvas on at the same time, mainly because we haven't got around to doing that. But there you go. So that's all the main parts of the Yurt, which is where I'll stop really. Partly because I'm running out of time, partly because I ran out of time to do the presentation, partly because they're all the main parts of the Yurt, so they're the important bits, and also because they're really that's as far as we've got with our own Yurt. So next up we'll have another canvas component, the crown cover, which you can see at the top there, which sits over the crown, but is secured by ropes, which means you can take it off to provide ventilation. With some sort of flooring. If we were putting this on a permanent site, we'd use a wooden deck like this, but we'll quite likely use some kind of rush matting as a temporary floor, and then finally some heating. So we're hoping to make a stove out of a recycled gas canister with hopefully the estimable Mr. Grant here. So I'll finish on my favourite piece of Yurt trivia. So traditionally on the Mongolian steppe there's not a lot of cover, and Yurts of course don't have facilities to speak of. So if you were going outside to answer the call of nature, this is what you typically say, which translates as going to look for a horse. So if you want to see more pictures of Yurts, hopefully one day a full Yurt, one day fairly soon as well, you can have a look on our website there, but I'll also be happy to answer any questions.
What's the longest that you've stayed in a Yurt?
That's a very good question. About 5 minutes.
Really?
I've never actually slept in one, but then I'm hoping that when this is finished, this will be the first one I've ever slept in, so that'll be nice.
Sorry, how long did it take you to build all those?
That's another good and probing question. Over a year now. We started when I was living with you. So
August 2011 we started.
Yeah, so about a year and 3 months. Yeah, so it's taken a while, I'm not gonna lie, but hopefully it's gonna last a while as well.
Do you need to get permission to build?
Interestingly, it's a grey area actually. I mean, to actually build it, yes, Graham kindly didn't complain too much when I built one in our shared backyard. To actually put it up, it's, as I say, it's a bit of a grey area because it's a temporary structure in the same way that a tent is, and you don't need planning permission for that. But then some people use them on a more permanent basis. And the picture I showed you there of the couple that live in there, they were actually in the papers because the council planning department were trying to force them to get planning permission. So we might see more of that in the future if more people start doing that. Good question.
What about council tax liability?
I guess that would be pretty much the same answer. Yes, you might find that if you leave your Yurt in one place for too long, the council come round and try to extract some tax from you.
As long as you're a student, that'll be okay.
Yeah, no problem.
John, you had a question?
So
yes,
the structural integrity is helped by this tension band. How do you put the tension in the tension band?
Actually brought here. Well, the way we've done ours is, so okay, I've done this at that's the wrong end. One end of this is attached to the door, so obviously it's being solid wood. Is quite stable. So one end is attached permanently at a set tension, and then the other end, which is this end here, goes through a hole that we drilled through the top of the door frame, and we use this little toggle here to hold that in place. So we pull it through to increase the tension, and then lock that on the back of the door frame with this little toggle. You actually find that it's not much of a struggle to get enough tension in it, because there's not actually that much tension holding it together. It's fairly easy to move, and you can actually put too much in which case you start to pull the top of the wall in.
I think we should probably move on.
Probably, yeah.
So if you've got any more questions, you could ask Dave afterwards, perhaps over a cup of tea. Could we just thank the speaker?